Hi, my name is Nancy Love. I'm speaking to you from Southern California on behalf of the Planet Peace Project. This is what I call a micropeace tutorial, and it is about how human trafficking and domestic violence uh, is fostered by the same tools and weapons against its victims. These things, these people who are involved in human trafficking, these people who are basically holding their own family members hostage, or boyfriend and girlfriend if they're not legally married. Um, these people are using the exact same techniques to essentially imprison people. The legal definition is false imprisonment. It's imprisonment of a sort, and it's false because there is no legal right whatsoever for that person to be in prison. We have laws in the United States of America that allow the community itself to join together and create bodies that legally are allowed to imprison people. But the term false imprisonment, it is my understanding, refers to a form of captivity that occurs without any legal justification or support for doing so. And false imprisonment is something for which you can be arrested, uh, convicted, and imprisoned and fined for. So, here goes. I'll try to make this quick. Uh, there are books about this to be written, there are encyclopedias about this to be written. And this is not all inclusive, but I'm going to list for you some of the things that a Los Angeles police officer told me about almost a decade ago. And he said he listed the ways that human traffickers keep their people hostage. And I said, wow, you just listed all the techniques used by spouse abusers to keep their spouses hostage or their children imprisoned or boyfriend girlfriend situations. Are you telling me that domestic violence is the same as human trafficking? He said they're using exactly the same methodologies. And then the LAPD guy said something that I'll never forget. He said, Nancy, in a way, the threats, the whole complex of ways that these people are committing false imprisonment are more insidious than duct tape, chains, and rope. I said, how do you mean? How can a threat be more, successful at keeping someone hostage than a chain? He said, because we've found people who freed themselves from physical captivity. The LAPD guy said that we sometimes find somebody naked running down the road or barely clothed running barefoot. We pick them up. We find out that they've got marks from having been held hostage physically. They literally were chained to a post or tied to a chair, or they had duct tape on their mouth, and they literally were held hostage physically. But they've managed to free themselves somehow. And then he almost started crying. And he was a young man. He'd only been in the field about 4 years. But then he almost started crying. He was so upset. But he said, but Nancy, we have tried and tried and tried to get some of these people who stay because they're protecting their children or their pets, or they've been threatened if they leave. And then we come and then we have to take their bodies to the morgue because they didn't make it out. They didn't manage to break the chains of the threats of domestic violence. I'm crying on behalf of all the people who didn't make it out and all the people who are still in those chains, because they're a legion. And those of us who care about that sort of thing have to be legion strong. We have to come and help them get out, because if they could do it alone, they would have done it. But now, the first thing that someone who wants to either hold you hostage as a human trafficking victim, or in your marriage or other kind of relationship, is they isolate you from your family and friends. They don't want you to be able to get the help you need. They don't want you to have the perspective shift that you're going to need to have the courage and the self-respect to do it. They want to diminish your self-respect. They want to be able to threaten you with physical harm, reputational loss, death, if they want to, without you going to the police, social service agencies, your family, or your friends. So the first thing they have to do in order to succeed in everything else they're going to do is isolate you. Sometimes that isolation involves financial and vehicular and even physical restraints. Frequently, they try to control all of the money involved in the relationship, and that includes both human trafficking, here again, and domestic violence contexts. They'll take credit cards, they'll steal cash. Even it's not uncommon for the person who's victimized to actually be someone who's working, a breadwinner. Well, you say if someone, why don't they leave? If someone is in one of these contexts, why don't, when they get to the grocery store, when they get to work that day, why don't they scream for police? Because it's so much more complicated than that. Often they have pets at that place. Often they have children. In many, many cases, these people, the perpetrators, threaten non-residential family or friends. So you can actually feel that you're being held hostage, being afraid that the perpetrator is going to hurt your mother who lives 1,500 miles away, or burn. I heard of a situation where the police were trying to help someone, and he never actually technically threatened her or their children or even their pets, but he did threaten to burn her parents' house down. And he said, the cop that told me that said that the threat to harm the parents' property was enough to keep that woman um, where she was. I didn't know her, but I knew the police officer who was trying to help her. Now, they will disable vehicles. It's extremely common to find whatever vehicle the person might use to make good their escape disabled, otherwise, maybe confiscated or whatever. And they will disable people physically. It is in the books that sometimes people are physically damaged, even to the point of not being able to walk out. And it is said among doctors who treat these sorts of issues that bruising, assault, broken bones, battered faces, black eyes, all these things are very effective at keeping people hostage because of what they call cellular memory. Apparently, we're so neurologically wired to keep ourselves safe and uninjured that once someone has started beating on human beings, that the human beings who are victims of that will be very deeply neurologically trained to try to avoid further harm, and they don't want to be in that context again. But I have heard of situations in which people have been even rendered incapable of standing or walking in these domestic violence and or human trafficking situations. And incidentally, that brings me to a point that I didn't put in my notes and really hadn't planned to discuss, but in point of fact, I have actually heard of situations where a spouse or a boyfriend drugged and human trafficked their mate. And I heard about it in 2019. A man drugged his wife of many years, and they seemed to get along great, but he drugged her and let other people have sex with her while she was unconscious and bragged about it. That's the only reason I know about it. And I heard about it happening many years ago, that someone drugged his wife and let at least one other person that uh, I know about have sex with his wife while she was unconscious. And the reason I know about that is because the person who did it told me. And I was just floored. I thought, God, I've never heard of anything like that. So domestic violence and human trafficking sometimes occur in the exact same household, and it's the exact same hostage, that's being victimized in both contexts. Um, these people will hack. It's obviously important to them to isolate you and therefore to know what you're saying and to whom. They don't want you talking to the police. They don't want you talking to the FBI or anyone else that can help you. They don't want you accessing help from social service agencies. If you're older, they don't want you talking to Adult Protective Services or anybody who could help you with elder abuse. If you're young, they don't want you talking to Child Protective Agency and so forth. They don't want you to call any family or friends, so they hack your phone. They clone your phone. It's possible to hack someone's phone without even touching it. You can clone someone's phone without even physically accessing the phone. They will hack your laptop or your tower computer. They will hack your Wi-Fi signal. In particular, if people use public Wi-Fi or household Wi-Fi, it's easier to get into the whole computer if you can hack the internet system that computer's using. And also any personal files you have to store in your residence. They'll go through your files. Sometimes they commit identity theft, particularly human traffickers will steal whatever information they can in order to uh, steal your identity and whatever people do with once they've done that. They threaten. They threaten to harm you. They threaten to harm your pets. They threaten to harm your children, whether they are biological children that you've had with that person or stepchildren or so forth. They threaten, as I mentioned, to harm non-residential family, non-residential friends, and the legal definition of false imprisonment does include threats against property alone. So you can be arrested, convicted, fined, and imprisoned for threatening to harm someone's property, whether you ever threaten a living organic creature or not. They belittle, they psychologically control. They absolutely have to make sure that these victims don't have any self respect or any self confidence. They want to make sure that they psychologically, as well as physically and financially and domestically, control the individual. They will say things like, well, who's going to help little old you? No one even knows you're here. Or you don't have any family or friends to come running. Or they'll taunt you that way. They'll bully and belittle. They will say, I heard of a context years ago where a man kept saying that his wife couldn't possibly survive without him. She would never leave him, no matter how much he harmed her, because she couldn't possibly survive him. And I think she left in 1990, so apparently, either 1990 or 1991, I'm not sure, but apparently for the last 30 years, she's proved him wrong. Go, just vive la resistance. Couldn't possibly survive without him. Ah. And then I can't read my own writing, and yes, I am using notes. And then it says, oh, yeah. They'll call the person, if they're in a relationship, they'll call the person ugly. That's a big one. They'll call the person, they'll say that the person couldn't possibly get another mate. They are stupid. They'll often they'll belittle the person cognitively. So they'll call you too ugly and too stupid to leave or to ever be involved with someone else. And they control housing. And here's something that a lot of people don't understand. You really need to consider how this power play works. It has to do with threatening you if you leave and threatening you uh, if you stay, but also telling you might have to leave at any given moment. So if someone controls your housing and you've already been made to be afraid of them, and especially if you don't have the skill set or the experience of literally being homeless in the street, and most of us don't know how to survive sleeping out of doors. There are certain skills that have to be learned, certain resources that have to be gained in order to survive, even for a very short period of literally being homeless in the street. But these people will say that basically you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. You end up having what's called learned helplessness. These people try to train you to feel completely helpless. That whether you stay, whether you go, you know, they've got you victimized because they will threaten you and your other loved ones and your property if you stay. And since they've already harmed you or controlled you in other ways, you know that these are legitimate threats, not just, they're not just a woofing. They threaten to find you, your children, your pets, or hurt your family or your friends or your property if you manage to get away from them. Here it goes. They also will threaten to make you homeless right then and there. If you argue with them, if you tell them that you want to leave, if you tell them they have no right to do what they're doing to you, they will say, fine, leave right now. Go homeless in the street. And since they've already controlled your self-respect and confidence, since they've already controlled your financial situation, since they may have already disabled your vehicle, and in point of fact, if they have already put you in a wheelchair or made you use crutches or something of that nature because you can't even function physically anymore, then that's very insidious. And the idea that, well, you're just going to have to leave. You're homeless right now. That's a very powerful tool. So I've cautioned law enforcement who've said, oh, well, the witnesses in this case are going to have to be honest. I'm saying, well, the witnesses in that case live there too. You're gonna ask somebody's kid if one parent has hurt the other parent. Do you understand that kid lives there and you're going to leave? I heard of a situation people years ago where, and this was not particularly a human trafficking or a domestic violence context, but I heard of a situation in, I think it was 2009, when in Los Angeles, a young landlord, a young drunk, out of control landlord, threatened a tenant physically. And he did it in front of witnesses. And the person called the police, and the police came and went and took various statements, and they left. And within 1 minute of the police actually walking out of the house, they hadn't even left the property yet. They were still literally, standing on the grounds of the property. The police hadn't even left the building, hardly more than left the building, when that man started threatening that tenant all over again. So, calling the police is a good thing. Filing police reports is a good thing. Trying to get help legally is a good thing. But the police come and go. And if they don't take you somewhere where they're going to make you, your pets, and your children safe, and the pets are the main reason a lot of people stay. The children are the primary reason most domestic violence people stay. Then trying to demand that people be honest witnesses is kind of spurious. And good luck on that. I have heard of situations where even judges during court hearings have been threatened. I know for an absolute fact in a court in California back about a year or two ago, a judge's wife and children were threatened by a perpetrator of human trafficking. The person kept saying, the people, plural, kept saying that they were rapists and human traffickers and drug dealers and all this stuff, animal abusers. They had taken someone's pets and harmed them in retaliation and an attempt to intimidate that person and obstruct justice as well. But they actually threatened the wife and children of a judge in California. And I heard of another situation in which a court reporter was also threatened. She actually was beaten by someone, physically assaulted, and they threatened her pets. I don't know if she had children or not, or if that sort of thing was involved, but I do know because I heard about it directly that a court reporter was, had various threats if she didn't fake court transcripts. What they wanted her to do was generate completely false transcripts of court proceedings. So they were generating false evidence. That brings me to my next point, and that is people who want to commit crimes against you will often try to make you seem like the criminal. They will file completely false police reports trying to discredit you, trying to get you into legal issues that aren't yours to have. And you might be the most completely innocent person, but they will try to get you into legal trouble to circumvent them getting into trouble when you tell the truth. And hopefully, they're hoping that they will be able to discredit you. Defamation in advance of you showing up and talking about the truth, may be very powerful if the police believe the lie instead of you. The good news I have on this is the vast majority of police officers are really good psychologists, and they can pretty much see through that ruse. They know about this tactic. They know that that is likely to happen. So they are accustomed to people, they're accustomed to perpetrators, criminals, lying about their victim. So, that is not something that often works, but it occasionally might. In some of these people's programs. I heard of a situation where a group of people were involved in human trafficking. They were drugging, raping, selling people. They were also involved in human slave uh, selling, selling of the whole person, and they were involved in human trafficking of organs. A lot of people don't realize that the term human trafficking now, unfortunately, has to include trafficking in body organs where the person has already been murdered. But, somebody's so greedy, so lazy, so stupid, so foul. They can't figure out a better way to make a legitimate earning, and they actually sell human body organs. And I want to, you know, that makes me quite sick indeed. So, deepfake tapes, they can generate videotapes making it seem that you said things that you never said or made confessions you never made. They plant evidence that it's not evidence. They generate false evidence by planting it in someone's living quarters or car, office space at work, whatever. And although this is a whole other video and I need to do more research to prepare for it, and I want to be optimistic and hope giving as well as informative, because a lot of the subjects I talk about are so awful. Some of you may not have any background in these subjects and fortunately don't have any personal experience with them. I personally became what I call an inadvertent expert in human trafficking, and I knew virtually nothing about it, not one thing. I thought human trafficking, that's prostitutes in Las Vegas, right? They're awake, they're willing, they're getting cocaine, they're getting money, whatever. I thought human trafficking, like a lot of you, involved conscious, willing participants, and the vast majority of time it does not. It does not. It involves slavery, rampant international slavery. But I do want to make a much longer video about that's exclusively talking about getting away, how human trafficking victims and people involved in domestic violence, both children and adults, can get the heck out of that situation. And I'll just give a very few points very quickly. One is try not to do it alone. I know. The very first thing I told you about was that the people who are perpetrating that, or the person who are perpetrating that against you, have isolated you. They're looking at your phone, your email. They're following you in person. I neglected to say sometimes they'll stalk you in person. They try to keep you from contacting anyone from the police to social service agencies to your family and friends, but you try not to do it alone. The day you leave and immediately thereafter, try not to do it alone. You may need to get your children out. You may need to get your pets out, and you must. Please don't abandon your pets in these contexts. They will be the primary targets of the anger. If you succeed in getting away from these people, please take your pets. Get help. Uh, get help from animal rescue organizations if you have to. But get them out first. You may have to abandon some property. You may not be able to pull up to wherever you're going with a U-Haul or a moving van and get everything out that belongs to you. So make that decision before you try. Decide what you're willing to abandon and that you may have to abandon some property, and that's going to be okay with you the day you leave. And get the most important things to you out before. And particularly if you have personal files, computers, anything that, like photographic evidence, video evidence, if you have highly valuable things that, particularly if they will support your case in court, get that out in advance of the day you leave, because you may have to abandon some property, and that needs to be all right with you the day that happens. So I have significantly more advice on how to get out of these contexts alive with your pets and your children, but I'm not going to try to do that now. This is getting long, and I know that people have things they want to do. I appreciate your time, I appreciate your attention, and I appreciate your increasing awareness. I very, very, very much appreciate your increasing awareness, because practically every day the news reports talk about people who don't make it out of domestic violence contexts alive. What I don't see anywhere near enough about is human trafficking, but it is an insidious, very ubiquitous thing that's happening, and it could be happening right next door. There's some nice neighborhoods and nice cities, and human trafficking is occurring in your neighborhood. And you don't know it because you don't have an education. And you don't have an education often because the news reports aren't sharing enough information about it, or because you don't want to. This is an unsavory subject. This is an unpleasant world. But people, until we come out of denial, until we learn, until we face what is happening, we can't change it. This is Nancy Love, live from Southern California, the North American continental capital of human trafficking. More later. I and my cohorts are just getting started here. 10:44.